Hey everybody, and thank you for joining me in this video. So in this video, what we will be discussing is basically another version of the WTF Are the basics. However, this is not going to be really a basic thing that a lot of people do. This is more of like something that is a bit more advanced in the basics, like using booleans, vectors, floats, stuff like that. But however, I do see that if you can understand the functionality of how it works, I feel like it becomes such a basic use tool that will allow you to do a bunch of cool things within your video game projects and open up a lot more doors for you to be able to do cool stuff. So basically in this video, I will be going over blueprint interfaces. So what exactly is a blueprint interface? Well, a blueprint interface is a collection of one or more function declarations without any implementation. They define a contract or a set of functions that a blueprint class can implement, which means any blueprint class that implements that interface must provide an implementation for the functions declared in that interface. So basically, the simple explanation of that, and this was something I read off my notes because I wanted to give you a high-level overview of it and then simplify it for what that actually means. So basically, a blueprint interface is something that you will make in your content drawer that when you do make the interface, it can be a collection of one or more functions that you will have to then implement across your blueprint actors, where you will have specific functionality in one blueprint that is trying to interact with another blueprint and their functionality. So right now it sounds confusing. However, I do have examples for y'all to show how you can utilize blueprint interfaces, and as well as being able to discuss more on that topic. So what I want to do in here, as you can see, I'm in the third person template, where I want to show you first how to make a blueprint interface. So normally what I like to do, and this is because I've kind of taken how the game animation sample project does their like interfaces, components, data files, etc., is I would like to go into the third person blueprint folder right here. So third person blueprints. So wherever I have my character blueprint, or blueprints that I will most of the time be implementing the functionality of things in, or using certain data files, is where I like to keep it in here. So in the blueprints folder, so if you're watching this video while having the game animation sample project open, or a basic third person template open, or a first person template open, go into the folder that contains your blueprint character. You don't have to do it, but like I said, this is something that I prefer to do just because it simplifies where everything's at, especially with where you'll be utilizing it most of the time. So in here, we're going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it interfaces, because what you want to do is you want to have any blueprint interface that you make within the interfaces folder. So for example, too, if you make like, enumeration files or structure files, you want to create a folder in here called data, where you would house that, because those are your data related files. So within your interfaces folder, we're going to open that up, and we're going to then create a blueprint interface. So to do that, you're going to right click, go to blueprint, and then blueprint interface. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss a very basic form, I guess, in a sense, for lack of better terms. We're going to discuss a specific type of blueprint interface that I implement most of the time in my projects. So I'm going to call this one BPI_interaction. So in this one, we're going to be specifically focusing on creating interactions with the blueprint interface. However, you do not have to call this. All we're doing here is we're calling this blueprint interface because it's going to house one or more functions that are related to interactions, which we will be going over in this video. If you were to make other types of blueprint interfaces for, like, maybe say, for example, movement, or, flying, or doing a specific action, you would call that BPI related to whatever you're doing. So In regards to this, before we open it up, let me give you some key characteristics about this blueprint interface, right? So in my notes, one of the things that I have jotted down of like key characteristics is that, you know, they are function declarations only. So interfaces declare functions but do not provide logic, because as you'll see when we open it up and create our function, they are going to be read-only functions. They are not going to be where we put our where we implement the functionality or the logic for our, you know, character or object that we're interacting with or NPC that we're talking to. You know, and then, you know, no variables are going to be declared in there. You know, you can do multiple types of implementations. So like, for example, different classes can be implemented in the same interface, but however in their own way. So I know that that sounds confusing, but I will go over that in a little bit. And then also too, the most important key characteristic of a blueprint interface is that it allows for decoupling. So one of the things that you'll see throughout different YouTube channels or YouTube videos is that you'll see maybe in like a beginner tutorial, let's say Pong for example, where you will have to set references like hard, soft references, or maybe do something else, or maybe you have to put in specific functionality, but then, you know, your character again like has all these hard coded references because you need to be able to, you know, find this actor, do this thing, you know, etc., etc. Well, this allows you to decouple, you know, where you would have this huge logic or functionality that you've implemented in your character, and you get to split it amongst, you know, what you're doing in your character versus what you're doing elsewhere. So let's go ahead and open up the blueprint interface interaction and create our first thing. So in here, as you can see that we've opened it up, like I said, they are function declarations only. So as you can see here, they are read-only interfaces. So if I try to click anywhere in here, you know how you would in a character blueprint or an animation blueprint, that they cannot, you know, you cannot select anything to create in here. Like you can't create a variable, you can't create, you know, add like line tracing, you can't do X, Y, and Z, you can't whatever, right? Because what this is essentially doing, and let me pull up Paint 3D for example to kind of give you a synopsis of what it's doing. So imagine in your blueprint interface or your game, right? You want to have a person that, you know, they interact, right? So you have, you know, your interaction. And sorry for the bad handwriting, but I want to kind of get it through. So you plan on interacting with objects, NPCs, whatever, right? So what you would want to do is, for example, let's say you're interacting with objects, you want to open a door. What you would then do is within your character blueprint, you will create the functionality for line tracing, you know, so wherever you're looking at, you say there's a door here, you know, a nice door. Well, what you want to do is from your character, you want to be able to line trace to the door to where we have an impact. And when you impact with it, you want the character to have an interaction with the door to where the door then swings open, right? That's what we all want. So with doing that, what we want to do is within our character, we want to set up the line trace only, but we want the door to rotate on its own. However, what is going to happen is that if we do it that way, then our character blueprint and our door blueprint in your game, they do not know that they exist. They like it because I've been doing IT for a long time, and there's a quote that I remember a teacher back in college saying to me, where basically the gist in IT or programming, whatever, is that computers are stupid until you tell it what to do. So in your game, when you want to interact from your character to the door, they don't know that they exist. So you have to basically give them something that tells them like, hey, something exists here, whether you tell it that it's specifically the door, whatever. So maybe you might hard code a reference, you know, within your character blueprint that will then tell it that, hey, there's a door, but then, you know, the other way around, you would probably tell the door that the character is there. However, now you've created a dependency where now you have to rely on this reference in order to tell the character and the door that each other exists. And we do not want that. So instead, what we do with the blueprint interfaces is that we essentially create like a portal, right, from the character to, let me get another one. Oops. So we basically create a portal where your character will do a line trace that will then send a message to the BPI or the blueprint interface that will then do its, you know, magical, you know, talking through here to then come out the side and then interact, or the other side, the other portal, to then interact with the door. So with this operation, we've essentially decoupled the referencing, and we get to go straight from the character to the door without telling it exists. However, we have basically our courier or our messenger that will deliver a message for us. Like, for example, you know, if you try to send in mail to like the IRS or maybe like a government office or maybe to your local dealership, right? Those people don't even know who you are. They don't know you exist. All they know is that, hey, we've been informed to collect information from you or to tell you this, etc., etc. So they will send mail your way until it ends at your door. And then vice versa, you would send the mail back to where it then comes back to you or the character, right? So that's how you want to look at it. So hopefully that did make sense. So now that when we look at it, we basically have an understanding that blueprint interfaces are essentially like portals or gateways that allow information to then pass through it and come out on the other side to then work the functionality or do the intended logic for whatever action you're trying to interact with. So as a basic use case for this, what we want to do is say we want to make a basic function, right? We just want to call it interact. That's it, right? That's all you're doing in here. So we have a blueprint interface with a function called interact because whatever we want to interact with, we want to then do, you know, whatever action that we intend to do. So this is the most basic form. You don't have any inputs, there's no outputs, etc., right? So then what you would do is you would compile and save. And then when you go into your character, so in this case, since I'm in the third person blueprints, I would go into the character blueprint. And then in here, what you would do to then call that blueprint interaction would be to go to class settings. You were going to go here to interfaces, implement interfaces, and click add. So in here, you'll notice that there is a lot of pre-made, pre-built blueprint interfaces that the game already gives you. However, me personally, I do not know what all of these do. I'm only familiar with what we create, right? So I'm going to look for my BPI interaction and I'm going to click on it. So now what that does is that over on our left side, it creates a section called interfaces where we then have the interact interface, right? So as you can see, I created this interact within the third person character. However, you know, you'll see other YouTube tutorials and videos that will do this same exact thing. And then they're going to do a bunch of other stuff that may or may not confuse you, where it's like, hey, why are we calling it here? Why are we not doing it here? Etc., right? So in this instance, all I'm showing you is how to add it. So now what we're going to look at is how to actually implement that. And let me start off with the first thing that I'm going to show you, where in the mini series that I go over with how to interact with objects, I'm going to show you how to actually truly implement that and then also go over more examples, right? So let me go ahead and pull up my first example and I'll be right back. Alrighty guys, I am back. So let me show you what I mean with the first the first sample interface, or the example that we have set up, or I've set up in this from the interaction mini series that I've done, right? So in my game animation sample project, I've implemented a folder called interfaces, because basically the goal here is to interact with this door and this chest that you see out in the background. So as you can see here, we do have a BPI interaction similar to what we created in the third person template. So if I open it up, it is literally the same thing that you saw earlier. We have only one function in here and it's called interact. However, in this situation, I am using it differently than what I showed you in the blueprint or the third person template. So if I go back out, go into my content drawer, and I'm going to go into content, and I've included a thing for starter content because that's how I made this chest and this door. If I go in here and I go into my blueprints, you'll see that I have an actor class called BP Interactable, because what I'm trying to do here is I want to have a series of child actors that are built off of this interactable, where they are going to be classified as my interactable objects. So off of this BP Interactable, I created this child called Blueprint Door. I created another child called Blueprint Chest. You can then create another child off of it by right-clicking and going to Create Child Blueprint, where you can call it Blueprint Coin or, Blueprint Treasure, stuff like that, right? So if I open up my BP Interactable, which is my parent class, you will see in the left-hand side that I have the interact function within my interfaces ready for me to use. However, you can see that in the parent blueprint that I do not have any sort of functionality in place to be able to interact or do certain things within my children, because all I'm doing at the top level is I only added the interact interface for then my children will have the interact interface, and then I can put any sort of logic in there. So let's say, for example, I open up my door, right? If I go into the door, this is where you will actually call that interface, right? So you'll see that it's not over here, because once you interact with it over here, it then creates a custom event right here that you can see event interact. And you will then see that I have functionality built off of it that will cause my door to open and then close. So as you can see, I have a branch right here that checks to see if the door is not open. If it is not open, then we will then set that boolean to true, because we are now interacting with it and we're calling it open. And then we are going to play a timeline that will then rotate the door on the Z axis to simulate that it is opening up. So if you're curious on how to build a timeline or this interaction set, please check out my mini series on how to set up interactions. So, going back to it, you can see that we have our custom event for our blueprint interface interact function. So now the question in here is, how do we actually get this to work? Well, that stems off of our character blueprint, or at least the sandbox blueprint within the game animation sample project. So you can see in here that I have, different interfaces in here. However, these are interfaces that were provided by the game animation sample project. They are not ones that I've made, because they're being used up here for their own interactions, for footsteps and stuff like that. I have not placed our BP interact in here, because what I am doing is I have a function set up to do line tracing in front of me, to where if we do hit something, an object of any kind, we're going to look at the actor, and that's what's coming out of our hit, because we are breaking the hit result here and we're checking off actor, and we're checking to see if the actor has the BPI interaction, which when we go back to the door, it does, because we've created a custom event, as you can see here, from BPI interaction using the interact function. So it has our BPI interact or BPI interaction. So because it's true, then we are going to send a call message. So this allows us to send basically information to the door, because it contains that BPI interaction. This is what I was referring to earlier with the portal. Our character has the message that is ready to be sent to the door in order for the door to open. So what it's going to do is okay, I've interacted with the object. Does the object have BPI interaction? If it's true, then send a message through the portal to where the BPI interaction custom event is, and then commit whatever logic is installed on the door to then open and close the door. So that is what this is this is the first part of the portal where it will send information through to then it will come to the door off of this and begin playing the logic or functionality to then open the door. And it is also the same thing with the chest. So if I open up my chest, you can see that I have similar functionality because I also have that custom event for the interaction blueprint interface. And it is checking that if the chest is open, and if it is or is not, open and close it based on the functionality that we've placed in here. So basically, to show you how it is working, as you can see, I have a line trace that's coming from my head, and wherever I'm looking around at, it is looking to impact with something, as you can see there. So now when I go to open this door, when I hit it, just like how I explained with the Paint 3D, it committed the line tracing functionality to then send all that information via message through the portal to the door to cause the door to open. So then when I hit it again, it should close. I don't know why it's not closing. It has been a bit buggy for me lately, but it should close on, impact, whatever, or when I interact with it. And then same thing for this chest. When I interact with it, okay, I like how it closes then. So when I interact with the chest, you can see that it opened up, but then, for some reason it's bugging out on me. It's not closing, but it should close. So again, when we look at it, we do the line trace here at our character, and it sends a message through the portal, which then goes through here to then come out to the door or the chest that we have, right? So that is a basic form of interaction, or more advanced form of interaction. Let me pull up my second example now to show you a basic form of a blueprint interface. So I'll be right back. Okay guys, I am back. So I'm showing this a bit early because I plan on doing a tutorial series on it, but this also has a form of a blueprint interface that I'm using in here, which is a Pong game, which I plan on making a Pong tutorial series that goes over this and showing you different ways that you can do different stuff, learning how to do this, that, and the other. But in my Pong, under my goal, you'll see that I have a function called check who scored. If I open up that function, you will see that off of the actor component, which, on component begin overlap with the box collision, I'm getting the overlap component and sending it into my function. Within my function, I'm checking if the component has a tag called player2 goal. If it does, then we are sending a blueprint interface message across the portal to our, wherever we have this set up. And as you can see, that we have a paddle reference set up that has a widget reference, right? So I have set references in my goal to be able to find my paddle actor class and my ball actor class, so I can get those references. So in here, it is getting my paddle, where my paddle has a widget reference within it, and that is what we want our target to be. So that is one thing I did forget to explain, is that the message, even though I said it doesn't know where it's being sent to, or basically gets sent off to the void to then find whoever, owns the BPI interaction, right? Well, that's not entirely true that it just searches blindly for the thing. We do still have to set a target, because that is what is housing the custom events. So in the game animation sample project, the door or the hit actor is basically the door or the chest that we are hitting. And like I said, that is an advanced example of how to do an interaction or a BP interface. But the hit actor off the break result will return, the object that implements the BPI interaction. And if that's true, send the message over to that actor to then execute that custom event. In my Pong game that I have, that I'll be making a tutorial about, we have to get the reference to where our custom BPI events are located in order to then be able to do whatever, right? So as you can see here, I have a message call to look in the widget interface for a function that says update player 1 score. So if I go into my UI and go into my UI scoreboard and go into graph, you will see that I have a event update player 1 score and update player 2 score. And as you can see, they are BPI interaction functions that are in here. And this is something too that I would like to demonstrate for y'all, where the blueprint interface, if we look at it, so under blueprint interfaces and score, you can see that I have two functions. I have update player 1 score and update player 2 score, because I want them to execute separately. So this is a situation where I now have a collection of functions in here that are basic, where I need to separate, okay, this is player 1 score, this is player 2 score. It's not a one size fits all where, hey, any object I interact with will implement the custom event functionality. This is now where we have to then separate, okay, this is what happens when player 1 scores, and this is what happens when player 2 scores. So when we go back in there, that's where you can see that I have stuff set up for player 1 and player 2. So this is another simple example, or this at least a simple example of how a blueprint interface works. So let me go ahead and hop back in the third person template so that way we can look at other stuff. Alright guys, I am back within the third person template. So now let's go ahead and reopen our BPI interactions so that way we can look at different stuff. So now, like I showed you, I did have a more advanced look at a blueprint interface interaction within the game animation sample project, and I had a very basic setup for a blueprint interface within my Pong game that I plan on doing a tutorial with that updates player 1 score or player 2 score, right? So in here, just how you saw in the Pong game that I'm doing, that we had multiple functions in here. And so I want to go over, some examples of how you would utilize different functions, especially for interact, right? And this was a comment that I had on one of my videos that I thought I would do a video regarding, just so that way I can try to explain some different, like a different scenario, right? So as you could see from the gas project, or at least now in my third person template, that we have the interact function. It's very basic. It has just an execution input. So it portals from the character blueprint to the door or the chest or the coin or the treasure that we're interacting with, and those objects execute the functionality. Now, say for example that you want to interact with a door, right? However, you have a door or a chest that requires a key to open, right? So we have a basic one size fits all function here, but now we have to lock players out of zones or lock them out of chests or make them look for stuff that they then need to be able to grab and say true to in order for, stuff to happen. So in this case, what we can do is add a new function and call it interact has item, right? Just like that, because now we can separate the differences, where it's like, okay, we have an interact for a one size fits all, but then we have an interact has item. So maybe this is a key item you want your character to look for in order to get to the next level, or maybe open up the, the next gate, or pick up, a key for a chest, stuff like that. So in this case, what we would want to do is give it an input. So just like normal functions, you can give it an input to where you can pass data in. So in this case, what we want to do for this is, say we want them to have a key. So we would want to say has item, right? Just like that. Meaning, or not even has item, has key item. Because as you've known in a lot of video games you may have played or seen or done, that they have a section in their inventory that has, is a specific section for key items. So those items can have names where it's like, hey, if you have name item, then, true, do this, right? So we have an input where we want to get that functionality. So if we compile and save and we go into our third person character, and again, this is an example, you don't want to put the interface into here, you want to put the interface, because when you double click it, you can see that that's how a custom event is made. And as you can see, we have and over here, interact has item, and then interact for our basic. However, we want the interact has item, we don't want the basic. So as you can see that with our interact has item, we have that input where it's like, okay, has item, if true, false, off branch, do this, that, other, whatever, right? But now let's look at how the interact message looks, right? As you can see, we don't have anything to tell it what, if we have the key item or not, right? All we have is a target where this is where we'll be referencing whatever has this custom function. So, if you're doing a door that requires a key, this is going to be on the door that will then execute if this condition is true. So for us to have this, we need to be able to then give it, like a boolean that it can shoot into, right? So in order for you to do that, you would be clicking on outputs, or at least, let me double check something real quick. Okay, my bad guys. I realized what I had done wrong, and I didn't mean to screw anybody up on that, because I had to double check something, because I looked at the interact and I was thinking to myself, I was like, why does it not have the boolean that I'm looking for? So I was very confused. So I had to double check something, and it was just me being stupid. I didn't call the right one. So as you can see, so like I was saying in the, previously before I cut out for a moment, that this is where this will be on your door or your chest or whatever, where, if you have the key item, then you will execute like, hey, open door, or, say screw off until you find the key, right? So on your character, because your character is going to have an inventory system, this is what is going to be placed on your character, where when you hit the door, so basically like you saw in the game animation sample project with the line trace, how I had a hit actor, and whatever the hit actor result was, it passed this message into, right? So say for example, this was door or chest that we hit off the hit actor. Well, what we want to do is, if we had an inventory system, what you would then do is you would then loop. So for example, let me do it like this. Loop through inventory, just like that, to where once you loop through the inventory, if you found your key, so in this case, if I open it up and it's like, oh boy, has key equals true, then what you would end up doing is, because we are true too, you would pass that boolean into this key item to where it is checked off. So then what will then happen is, when we interact with the door, because we've met the key requirement, then we would pass it through here to where we then, execute like, okay, open door here, don't, or reverse the door here, whatever. Or maybe like we just want the door to remain open because the area is unlocked for them to go back and forth between. So that is another situation where you would want to have this in the door chest to open permanently, but in your character blueprint that has the inventory system, you're going to loop through the inventory. If you found the key item, you're then going to pass that boolean check into here to where once you interact with it, it's like, okay, boom, we have that item, can do what we're supposed to do. So that is an example of how you can use blueprint interfaces to set up multiple, functions that represent like relative ideas. Like if you have several different interaction types, like maybe you might have another interaction where it's like move platform, and that you give it a float input of where you want it to move to, or like I showed you in this one, has key item, if true, open the door, at the custom event, stuff like that. So that is pretty much kind of a basic rundown, as basic as I can make it and as short as I can make it, of how you can utilize blueprint interfaces. So if you did enjoy that, guys, please check out my other videos and my future videos to come. But other than that, hope you enjoyed it, hope it was educational, and I hope y'all take care, and I will see y'all later.